Welcome to the Yang Gang Roundtable Podcast, an ongoing discussion of poverty, UBI, and electoral politics. It is Friday, July 17th. I am your host, Jeremy Sammons. Later in the show today, we will be joined by Green Party nominee Howie Hawkins. But joining me right now are 5 other UBI advocates who will introduce themselves now. And we will start with you, Ariel.
Hello, my name is Ariel. If you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Ariels_Armada. That's ARIELS_ARMADA. I just recently had an interview with Liam O'Mara, who's running for Congress. I believe it's in California's 46th district. Yeah. And you can find that on Revolutionary Thinking. Just go to youtube.com/Revolutionary Thinking. And if you like drone photos, Ariels_Ariels. That's ARIELS_AERIALS. And I'll pass it to our other hosts.
Sheridan.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm Sheridan. You can find me on Twitter at JSaberGamer, JSABERGAMER. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be asking the Green Party what they think of basic income.
We are also joined today by Hannah Wan.
Hi, my name's Hannah. I'm originally from Seattle, but I'm currently in Los Angeles in support of Black Lives Matter, working with Ground Game LA. I'm also a former senior staffer to David Kim for Congress in LA's 34th district, and I'm also co-founder of Testify for UBI. Thanks for having me.
Faye Doney.
Hello. My name is Faye. I would say I'm a nomadic activist if I was to give myself the title. And my Twitter handle is at @TizDoney, so TISDONEY. Come check me out.
And last but not least, Faye Ku.
Hello, I am at Palestine Math on Twitter.
And rolling right into it, Howie Hawkins has just entered the waiting room. So without further ado.
So exciting. Hello, Howie.
Hello.
Mr. Hawkins,
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us.
This really is a gang of folks.
Yes, sir. Welcome to the roundtable. How are you today?
I'm good. Got a button my shirt. I just came running in here. I got thrown out of a FedEx because of a coronavirus contamination. They just shut it down. So I had to run up from the eastern suburbs to the northern suburbs, so I'm running behind. A lot of paperwork to print out to get on the ballot, different forms. So
well, thank you for joining us,
state, so woohoo.
No, I'm glad to be here.
All right, sir. So I know our time is a little limited here with you today, so we'll kind of just jump into it. But before we get going, this is the Yang Gang Roundtable Podcast. We are a basic income advocacy group. So don't be surprised if many of our questions today are, regarding basic income. But once again, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that being said, I will toss it to the group.
If I could actually ask something that isn't basic income related, because it's been burning in the back of my mind for a few weeks now. It's November 3rd, I believe. Yeah, November 3rd. Biden has won, but the Green Party has 10% of the popular vote and 7% of the electoral college. What happens to the Green Party then?
Well, I think we're in the debate. I mean, they couldn't exclude us from the main news narrative at that point, and we could be demanding our spokespeople be there on CNN, NBC, MSNBC, as regular commentators on what's going on. If we got 7% of the electoral vote, we want a state. I want to know what state that is. Maybe it's Maine, where we have ranked choice voting. But Maine has 4 electoral votes, so we must have won Maine in another state. I mean,
Maine and Nebraska, maybe, because those are the 2 with ranked choice.
Yeah, that's split, so that would give us 1 more. But 7% would be like 20-something electoral votes. So that would be a great result. I think we're more likely to get 10% of the popular vote than any electoral votes at this point. So, but I think if we get on that scale, one thing is we get over 5%, then we're qualified for a campaign fund, public campaign financing in the 2024 election. And that's for the general election. So we don't even get that money till after Labor Day or somewhere around there. But that would be, it's prorated. So if you're 5 to 25% of the popular vote, you're considered a minor party, and you get a prorated share of the little bit over 100 million that's available to the major parties, but they don't take anymore because they can raise so much private money. But for the Green Party, that would be big. If we got 10%, that's what? Prorate that between 10 and 20, or 5 and 25, that's about 40% of that 100 million. $40 million, boy. The Green Party could really get its message across with $40 million. So a lot of good things would come with 10% of the popular vote and 7% of the electoral college. But I'll just take 10% of the popular vote.
Yeah, I know that that's incredibly optimistic to have 7% of the electoral, especially with its incredible pressure, let's say, from the DNC and RNC.
You know, I think their pressure, the more Trump crumbles, the less pressure they put on the people that are sweating it out. I mean, right now it looks like a landslide for Biden. So then the question is, if you want some real changes, are you going to vote for them? Or are you going to vote for Biden, who's Mr. Status Quo, if there ever was anybody? He wants to go back to the future.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You know,
Mr.
Trump is a
Hawkins.
disaster, but Biden is not going to solve our problems.
One thing that was really unique about the Yang Gang is that we drew support from all over the political spectrum, you know, from conservatives, even Trump supporters, independents, progressives, self-described socialists. For those that are more towards the center of ideology, or even perhaps to the right, does the Green Party have a place for these voters?
Absolutely. I mean, people give themselves labels, and then you ask them, "Do you want to stop climate change? Do you think everybody should have a right to health care? Should the minimum wage be raised? Should we stop corporate welfare to these companies that don't need it?" And people, those are not isms. Those are like, of course. Those are majoritarian positions. I mean, Ralph Nader and I talk to Ralph Nader pretty regularly. He keeps saying, you got to emphasize those issues that have left and right appeal, because that's where the people are at. So yeah, there's a place for folks that call themselves whatever they call themselves in the Green Party. You know, look at the policies we're advocating. That's what people vote for. They don't vote for isms or, you know, ideological brands or identities. They vote for, you know, people they trust. That's what they vote for. They vote for their feeling about the people they're voting about. And then secondly, on policies. And ideology is way down the list.
Right. You hit up something big there. Like, we capitalize the profits and we socialize the losses. Sorry, Faye, you wanted to go, but yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I'm just wanting to ask Mr. Hawkins, who is running for president in 2020 as the Green Party. What is different about the Green Party? What is defining? What's defining about the Green Party?
As opposed to the two parties in the two-party corporate state system, right?
Well, just how do you define somebody who would be interested in the Green Party, for example?
Well, we're trying to represent the people, not the corporations. We don't take money from corporate interests, for-profit entities. We take it from regular people. That defines our class independence from the corporate ruling class. And then we have 4 pillars, 4 values that we talk about, which are grassroots democracy, or participatory democracy, as we called it in the 60s, so that people are engaged in the decisions that affect them. Social justice, which is self-explanatory. Peace. We have a very aggressive U.S. state with 800 foreign military bases. We're involved in 7 shooting wars right now. They call them the endless wars. And that's all about a global military empire to protect U.S.-based global corporations. It's not about the security of the American people. So that distinguishes us. And then finally, ecology. That's our 4th pillar. And I talk about climate change. Trump calls climate change a hoax, but the Democrats act as if it's a hoax. And they've just confirmed that in the last couple of weeks with the House Democrats proposal and then this joint Biden-Sanders report on their climate policy. That's a recipe for disaster. So I think, it's very clear that we're different from the two major parties. And it's around those values: democracy, ecology, justice, and peace.
Thank you for explaining that. Really appreciate it.
So what are your thoughts on reoccurring stimulus checks?
What are my thoughts on? You broke up.
Oh, she said reoccurring stimulus checks.
Reoccurring stimulus checks.
You mean the checks to individuals? Have the $1,200 be reoccurring?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, during the crisis, I think it should be $2,000 for people below an income threshold. I don't think Warren Buffett needs $2,000 a month, and there should be $500 per child, and that should be out there to maintain the whole economy, because then people can make their rent and mortgage payments. They can buy their groceries, and I think a thing we could have done, should have done, the payroll protection program was kind of like that, but it was poorly executed, which they did in Europe, and that is pay companies to keep people on their payroll for the duration. And then we could reopen. Now we have massive unemployment. A lot of small businesses have collapsed because if you're a small business, you can't go to the bank to get credit. You got that business up on your family's investments, your credit card, and that kind of thing. If you're out of cash, you're out of business. So we have a lot of damage there. So yeah, I think they're about to relook at the another relief package, and there better be something in for people, just so they got cash in their pocket, or this depression is going to go even deeper. You've seen the projections, up to 28 million people facing eviction in September because they can't pay the rent or the mortgage. They'll be foreclosed. Up to 10 million people have lost their health insurance because their insurance was tied to their job. And God forbid you get COVID. How are you going to pay for it? It's tens of thousands of dollars, up to $1 million. We've had reports on that. Medicare should be covering that right now. There's a lot we need to do just to keep people afloat. And, the thing that's got me really angry right now is, Trump gave up. COVID won. He's a loser. Everybody can see that. But where the hell is Joe Biden? He lives within commuter distance of the White House press corps. He used to commute to the Senate, get on Amtrak. He could get in a limousine. And he could convene the White House press corps for regular news conferences like Andrew Cuomo was doing. Y'all saw that on cable? Mm-hmm. He was showing up Trump. Well, Biden could be doing that and pointing out what we need to do that every other damn organized society in the world has done. And that is test, contact, trace, and quarantine. Suppress the virus, and then we can go back to business and back to school. And in this country, they're leaving it to private enterprise. They got a dogmatic faith that can do everything, and to the states. And the states are bidding against each other for personal protective equipment and medical supplies. And now the infections are exploding. One of the foremost epidemiologists yesterday put in the Daily Beast, 800,000 deaths by the end of the year. This is really bad. And, I expect Trump to not have a clue what he's doing, but where the hell is Biden? He's got a platform. I've been saying this, on podcasts and what little, larger media I get. But, I can't see why this isn't a constant theme from the Democratic leadership. Not just Biden, Schumer, Pelosi. Why is the Senate on recess right now in the midst of this explosion of infections and the economic problems they're talking about? They're going to get back there next Monday and start to deal with this. But, that's why I say the two governing parties are presiding over a failed state. We've really got to build an alternative.
Howie, are any Green Party candidates running for Congress or?
Yes, and I don't have a number for you, but in many of the states there are.
Okay. We also have our Humanity First candidates running for Congress. I don't know if you've heard of them, but one we have is David Kim. He's running up against a corporate Democrat. So maybe if in one of these states we have somebody from Humanity First movement and you have somebody from the Green Party movement, we can co-endorse or something.
Well, I'm all open to that. I've never heard of Humanity First, but I'll check it out. We are, well, Angela Walker, my running mate, and I do have also the nomination of the Socialist Party. They don't have any ballot lines, but it's a great tradition going back to Eugene Debs and Norman Thomas and A. Philip Randolph. And we're seeking the nominations of some state independent progressive parties like the Oregon Progressive Party. So we're open to those kind of relationships. And so, you know, I would look into that and, you know, get a hold of me, you know, directly, and we'll see what, you know, the situation is there and see what's possible.
So I'm interested in the COVID-19 emergency measures that you have on your platform. That $2,000 a month, you believe should go to all adults over the age of 16. I like how you're starting it at a little bit earlier than what we've seen with the $1,200 stimulus. Seems like 17-year-olds were completely cut out of the stimulus for some reason this last time.
Yeah. Well, we just, the idea when we wrote that was this money's got to get out the door because people got, you know, bills coming and they need help right now. And so that's a short-term program and for the duration of the crisis. Over the longer run, you know, we support a guaranteed income above poverty. The demand that the civil rights movement, particularly at the Poor People's Campaign, Martin Luther King was making in the second half of the 60s. And basically we build it into the tax structure. So they call it a negative income tax technically, but if your income is below the poverty line, the government sends you money to get you up above the poverty line. And then as your income goes up, you pay a progressively scaled income tax, which has to become much more progressive. That's another thing. And the poverty line should be basically doubled. That's what the research on self-sufficiency budgets show. You're going to be able to pay your bills for everything that everybody ought to have, from, you know, a place to live and food to eat and clothing on their back, to other things that are now necessary to participate in modern life, like broadband access. The poverty line has to be doubled. So, you know, our analysis of what that would cost is about no more than $500 billion, about $500 billion for a doubled poverty line. If you bring it up to the current poverty line, the estimate we made last year was $219 billion, which is not small, but it's small compared to the Pentagon budget. And, you know, ending poverty ought to be a top priority. You know, why is that necessary in a country so rich as ours?
I don't think you've said that is the thing that we all agree with here. Absolutely, I think.
Yeah, so I actually had a question about the guaranteed minimum income policy that you just talked about. And I know almost everyone here, we're in favor of a universal basic income because it's not based on the theory that every human has value and that we are all contributors to this society. And so we are owed basically a share of it in the form of a basic income. And one key part of it is the universality. So sure, Warren Buffett doesn't need it, but Warren Buffett could, I don't know, maybe lose everything one day. And he also doesn't deserve to starve, I guess. And also being somebody as rich as Warren Buffett, he would be paying way more in taxes based on how UBI is funded. So for us, I feel like the universality is really important because it's not just about survival. It's also about what else we can do. Like once we are above the poverty line, once we have all our basic needs covered. So having that additional money, like once you're set, it opens doors to other things that we can do. And also it removes means testing, which is very bureaucratically demanding on the people who are suffering the most, and also very demeaning, like having to prove that you are destitute. And so like the universality takes care of, I guess, the dignity of people who are suffering. So I guess if you want to speak to a little more about like why is universality not included in your policy?
Well, I would say it is universal. If Warren Buffett lost all his money, he'd fill out an income tax form and he would get regular checks. And that's nobody, you know, looking into your private business any more than what you already do when you fill out your taxes, which could be a lot simpler.
So would it be evaluated on a monthly basis or annual basis? Because like another part is the bureaucracy of it. Because right now, like with our current social safety net, it's like people are waiting months and months when they need the money right now.
Yeah, well, I would suggest a quarterly basis. If you have to make quarterly payments on your income taxes without, you know, incurring a penalty, because that's the way your income comes in, and you don't withhold enough through your wage labor, I think the same thing could be done. So the form could be filled out quarterly or updated quarterly, and it should be simple. It shouldn't be onerous.
At the same time, with people who make a lot of money, they also can pay a lot to accountants to make it seem like they're not making any income either. So I don't know.
Well, we got to close the tax havens, and we got to close the loopholes for these people. The tax code is, you know, big long shelf, and there are lots of little laws written for particular people or particular companies. We got to clean that out and have a simple system that applies to everybody. You know, another concern with paying it to the Warren Buffetts is that under the current tax structure, counting local, state, and federal, labor income is paying at a higher rate than capital income. So you're taxing working people at a higher rate than you are Warren Buffett to pay Warren Buffett money he doesn't need when you make it universal.
Mr. Hawkins, I have a suggestion, which is we can make the payment of it universal because we don't actually know how much people are making right at this moment. And then we can make the taxation, you know, once we know that people have survived this year and we're doing really well, because you can't predict what your, you know, future earnings might be based on what you earned last year. You might lose your business this year. We don't know it yet. Maybe we could tax that money back the next year, thereby saving an entire administration on the, you know, the front end, and just using the tax system we already have in the back end.
Well, you really have to change the tax structure because Buffett and Gates and Trump would still get their money. I mean, capital income now is what, 20%? The top bracket for wage income is 35%. So at best, you're getting back about a third of what you gave to those rich folks, and more closer to 20%, a fifth, because most of their income is capital income. So, and you tax the working class at a higher rate than the capitalist class to pay that universal basic income to rich folks.
Right, but at the same time, there are way more working folk or people who aren't making any enough, and there's such a small percentage of the super rich. So it's like, what's it matter to give like maybe a couple $100,000 a month to the ultra rich when it's helping like people at the bottom tier way more?
Well, you're paying out. I mean, you know, the $1,000 a month that Andrew Yang was proposing was, depending on who you talk to, $3.8 trillion. That's much bigger than the Pentagon, much bigger than the discretionary budget of the federal government.
But that's only
if I could,
isolation. Like if you look at just the number itself, like, sure, but what else are we spending that could be replaced by this monthly payment? So it's like if you're looking at the number in isolation, sure, that's a big number. But if you look at the other systemic effects that it has, then it's a lot lower.
So you want to replace public housing assistance, Section 8, home heating assistance, food stamps. I mean,
It depends.
And you add all those together, it's still a small fraction of 3.8 trillion.
We can take a look at the numbers with you another time, Mr. Hawkins. I want to give Sheridan a chance to ask his next question. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, this actually leads from what you guys were just talking about a little bit. I was curious about your taxation policies, and particularly that you have land value tax and wealth taxes, which are traditionally very easy to avoid with the clever accounting Hannah brought up. However, there is a tax that isn't that gameable that you don't have included, a value added tax, which is a consumption tax, which could really help control issues that you see of Warren Buffett not needing that extra $2,000 a month. He'll just consume it in value added taxes as he buys more shares on the stock market, correct?
He can avoid which tax? The wealth tax?
Wealth tax and land value tax through how you value and appreciate the land and, of course, wealth.
Well, the values of the land, I mean, that depends on the jurisdiction doing the calculations. Right now, it's mostly local.
Yes, but you can still pay for an appreciation from someone you know to give an appropriate one for your accountant. I mean, it's not hard to bribe the system.
We got to crack down on corporate crime and clever accounts that enable people to avoid taxes. We got to crack down on the foreign tax havens where trillions of dollars are stowed away. Wealth tax is enforceable. I suggest you look at The Triumph of Injustice by Jason Zuckman and see how they propose to do that. We have this problem because we got a rich man's government, and they let the rich get away with this stuff. You know, we can have clever accountants too working for the public to catch these corporate criminals.
Oh yeah, but we need to fund the IRS.
Donald Trump has not shown us his taxes. We know this guy's got a rap sheet going back decades. He tells one thing to the insurance company, another thing to the bank, another thing to the tax man. And he's sitting there in the presidency with immunity. And now New York can get its taxes, or can have Congress get its taxes because of a law passed in New York. And the damn Democrat that's running that committee in the House says, no, we want his federal taxes. We don't want to look at his state taxes. And now with his court decision, they ain't going to get no taxes for a while. I mean, that's what goes on. We can't let these rich, I was going to use a bad word, get away with this.
We're all right there with you. The IRS is woefully underfunded to tackle the wealthy, and that's why poverty is even more punishing, because it's cheaper to extract value from poor people.
And like, not just to extract money from poor people, but then like punish them for not being able to, you know, keep their lawns clean enough, right? We were just talking before you got on about like, well, Sheridan, you want to talk about it?
Oh yes, my city has an ordinance against litter and weeds in the lawn, and the city is trying to enforce it, and the penalty is absurd, but we don't need to go into that. I think we all understand localities being ridiculous.
But it's just, I guess to me, it's just, there are so many predatory businesses, and it's even hard for people to even know who's been, you know, their money taken away because of some kind of scam and stuff. The only way I've been able to find out about this stuff is because of Netflix TV shows, you know, and it's like, that seems to be where everyone's getting a lot of their information if it isn't from online, you know. Anyway.
So, Mr. Hawkins, I wanted to also bring your attention to something that is plaguing both of the major candidates, which is that neither one of them seems to have the full support of women who are a little bit concerned about past misconduct or possible misconduct. We just don't know what's really happened in there. And there have been a lot of accusations, especially for the incumbent. And so I was reading on your website, on your questionnaires about you have different questionnaires from different groups that are asking you interesting questions. And I like the answer that you seem to be very serious about taking the Me Too movement seriously and really addressing women's concerns. Can you tell us a little bit more about your women's policies?
When the allegations of sexual harassment or assault, they have to be taken seriously. And starting with police forces. I mean, we keep getting these stories where they got rape kits sitting in a file somewhere in a file drawer, and they're not taking it seriously. So I think that's the front line where we got to deal with that. In terms of women policy, the ERA should pass. We've got, just a couple more states, I believe, and that will give women a stronger legal tool to fight discrimination. We've got to codify Roe v. Wade in Congress before the Supreme Court takes it away. And then we got to enforce the laws that are on the books. Disparity in wages in a lot of companies. There's not comparable pay for comparable work. Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department has not been very forceful in dealing with sexual discrimination as well as racial discrimination. You need a government that's committed to the people and not to protecting companies that don't want to have to deal with, in the end, paying women more. So I think, we've got a lot of good laws on the books. We just don't enforce them. And what enforcement there is or regulation there is biased. So those are some of the top policies in terms of a women's agenda. And I think, when you guys talk about a universal basic income and I talk about a guaranteed minimum income, we're talking about the caregivers who tend to be women who don't get compensated or don't have the independent economic wherewithal to get out of maybe a relationship they shouldn't be in because it's dangerous and they're being abused. So, I mean, I think that's probably the most important reason to have some kind of basic income for everybody so that they can have that economic independence, particularly women. And, poverty disproportionately affects women, often single women with children. So that's another part of a women's agenda. We've got to take care of the young women raising children who are really on the edge economically. And then their children are coming up in poverty, and that creates more problems.
It's going to be more expensive to fix those problems later, it seems, than to just help them now while
all
they're
the
growing up.
studies show that. You invest now in preventing, like just after school youth programs and city recreations. It's like a 7-to-1 return on investment compared to where young people don't have those options and they get involved in the criminal justice system, what that costs.
So we wanted to give you a chance. Jeremy, do you want to do that?
Yeah, Mr. Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us today. I know your time is valuable and you're a busy guy, but we would love to have you for another 15 minutes or so if you're available.
I'm available. I'm right here. And I don't have to be anywhere else.
Okay, if you feel comfortable, we can continue the conversation, but please let us know if you need to go.
I'm good.
We
I'm
really
good.
value your time. Okay.
Oh, well, then can I have you explain your minimum income above poverty a little bit more?
Yeah, this was a big deal when I was coming up in the 60s. It was what the National Welfare Rights Organization was demanding. It's what Martin Luther King was demanding. It was on the Poor People's Campaign, Economic Bill of Rights. And basically, it's building into the tax structure. If you read the literature, they call it a negative income tax. And people give Milton Friedman credit, but it goes way back before him. And it's a simple way of, seeing who needs money to get up to a basic standard of living. And as I said, we would double the poverty line we have now so that it's a realistic poverty line. The poverty line we got now is 3 times the food budget designed to keep somebody alive for 3 months back in the 50s. And they adopted it in the 60s. And they've been just updating it with the cost of living for food. And food is not going up as fast as housing and healthcare and a college education. So it's really a low level of a poverty line and doesn't reflect how difficult it is for people between that poverty line and 200% of poverty. So you double the poverty line, and then if your income is below the poverty line, the government sends you money to bring you up above the poverty line. And as Martin Luther King said, the best way to end poverty is to give poor people money. That's why they're poor. Most poor people are working hard. I live in a neighborhood in Syracuse. People get up early in the morning to go clean up the hospital, pick up the garbage, whatever it is. And then sometimes they work a second job in the evening. They work hard and they still low income. People work hard. We got to raise the wages too. So that's another question.
Right. And also
I want to clarify. I want to clarify. Your minimum income is essentially $24,000 a year, rebated through the IRS?
Well, no, it's about $2,000 per adult per month. And that would bring them up to, and the way I looked at that was a poverty line for a family of 3.
So
They could support themselves and their children.
my clarification, I guess, is this a one-time lump sum of $24,000 a year rebated through the IRS, or is this a quarterly payment of what would it be, $45,000, or is it a monthly payment of $2,000?
It would be monthly payments, and the amount would vary depending on how far you were below the poverty line.
I'm assuming 0. Let's just assume 0. No one has any employment history, just brand new American citizen ready to work.
A single adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be $2,000 a month.
Okay.
And that assumes they have no income. So yeah, they're ready to go to work, and they got here. Here's $2,000. Good luck.
How does this apply to people who are gig workers, who might even just be doing stuff like, using Facebook jobs or Craigslist, for those kind of things? Like, how does that affect those people? I mean, like under the table work even.
Well, we don't want under the table work because everybody should be paying their fair share of, our common wealth, our roads and bridges and public services, our schools. So we want to, create a labor market where people don't have or can't work under the table. I know that a lot of that goes on. The estimates vary, up to 10% of the, all the exchanges. If you're working under the table and don't report the income, IRS isn't going to know that. So what we're talking about is what the income you report. And then, where does that stand in relation to the poverty line or the percentage of your income you should pay in taxes based on your income?
Hannah, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, thanks for coming on here. One of the pillars that you mentioned for the Green Party was social justice. Would you mind outlining some specific policies that support that?
Sure. First of all, economic justice. We're calling for an economic bill of rights. It includes a job guarantee, the guaranteed income above poverty, Medicare for all, affordable housing for all, which we want to do by rent control at the federal level, like we did during World War II in this current emergency. With we're up to, what is it now? About 700,000 homeless people, and it's about to get much worse. So, and people are being displaced. So rent control, and then we want to build 25 million units of public housing. So it's like Europe, where it's mixed income housing. There's about 40% of the units reserved for low income people, which will solve their access to affordability. But you also want, regular working class folks and professionals in these developments. There'll be high quality developments so that you're not segregating the poor. So that's housing. Education. Tuition free from pre-K through post-secondary, college, trade schools, and continuing adult education. And then finally, a secure retirement. And there we want to double the Social Security benefit. So that's dealing with economic justice. Now, we need to deal with racial justice. We've had an uprising against the centuries-old pandemic of racism, which people of color have known about firsthand, but a lot of white people are now upset about it because they saw it in living color on their TV screens with George Floyd and some of these other cases. And so what we need to do there is, first of all, the police have to be under community control. Right now, they police themselves, and that's how they get away with murder and other crimes, like civil asset forfeiture and slush funds. A lot of these departments have. And by that, I mean not just review boards, but a commission, publicly elected or even selected randomly like a jury, that would represent the community and hire and fire the police chief, review who's on the forces and get rid of the racists and the sadists, oversee the policies, practices, budgets, and be able to independently investigate and discipline officers. So they don't have this special deal where they get to investigate themselves, and they got this, culture that they protect each other. So that's one thing. Defund the police is a good idea, but there's not enough money in the police departments to deal with the social services that the police are called in to control. So they, you know, somebody's homeless, they're told to go do a vagrancy charge. A homeless person needs a home. A drug addict doesn't need to go to jail. They need to go to drug treatment. Somebody with a mental health crisis needs somebody knows how to deal with that. Not a cop that's pretty clueless about that with a firearm and may panic, and we've had a lot of tragedies with that. But you can take the whole police department budget and it won't be big enough to solve those problems. So we're saying we need a Marshall Plan for the cities to invest in the housing, in the jobs, in the businesses, in the healthcare, in the schools that these racially oppressed communities have lacked because of generations of segregation, discrimination, and exploitation. So I'm saying that movement that we got needs to they need to demand more. Not just stop chokeholds, but community control of the police. And not just defund the police, but defund the military. And of course, that doesn't mean completely defund police and military, but it means making sure that these social services and community resources are available to people that haven't had them. That's racial justice. And then there's a whole range of, you know, social justice areas. LGBTQIA folks, we need the Equality Act passed. It passed the House, needs to pass the Senate, and be signed by the president. You need a new attitude from the president about those folks, because what we got now is, you know, like the way transgender people in the military were treated by Trump is very negative to all transgender people wherever they are. And then we need to honor the American Indian treaties. There's a lot of land that was taken and services promised but not provided. There's a Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. There are Mexican Americans that have lost land that they were given at the end of the Mexican War, and reparations for African Americans. That bill that Congress put in 79 should pass. It's to study and develop proposals for reparations. And I think that's the next step, because the African American community needs to define what they think would repair the damage. And some of that will be compensation to households, because Black wealth is 1/10 of white wealth by household, but also institutions and collective reparations. The Black land base was basically stolen from the Black farmers by the USDA over, you know, really 150 years. And they won in court, and the USDA still was very poor at compensating. That land base hasn't been restored. And then there are educational and cultural and economic institutions that a reparations program might invest in to help the Black community improve its standing and its quality of life. So I think there's a lot of social justice work to do, and I think I covered the main areas there.
Howie, on one comment, like you talked about a jobs guarantee. A lot of times, a lot of people like get a lot of education. They get like a bachelor's or a master's, but they end up in like menial jobs they could have done. Like if we're seriously talking as a dropout of high school, it's like maybe a telemarketing job, or a job that you just maybe, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but like pick up trash. It's like, but like, what is it that a person can have so much credentials and so much knowledge and end up with like an exploitative line of work?
Well, I mean, the structure of the job market and the available jobs keeps changing with technology. And, you know, my philosophy is we need carpenters that read Aristotle. When I went to Ivy League school, I also had vocational classes in high school. I had a professor tell me, and this is Dartmouth College, an Ivy League school. He said, you rich guys are going to hire you smart guys. It was all guys back then, to write memos for the rich guys, whether you're in government, corporation, or the nonprofit sector. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, and only 5 people would read them. And knowing what I knew even then, they don't even read them. You know, you write papers for your professor, and then he gives comments, and did he really read what I said? So I said, no, I don't want to do that. I did like, you know, building stuff, and that was when we were doing green jobs in a worker co-op in the 70s, you know, installing wind and solar, doing energy audits, insulating homes, retrofitting them. And I liked that work better than I did the writing memos part. But, you know, I that doesn't mean I shouldn't have gone to Dartmouth College. I learned so much there. I mean, one thing I learned is that the rich are no better than the rest of us. They got all the foibles that ordinary people do. The question is, there are certain jobs that are intrinsically really fun doing. One thing that we can do with worker co-ops is share the brain work and the sweat work, and adjust it to people's ability to do sweat work. We have a job guarantee in our eco-socialist Green New Deal, which will create 38 million jobs to get this transition to clean energy done in a decade. But there's some people that are not suited to the construction or the factory work for various reasons, physical ability, age, attitude, so if they can't find a living wage job in the private sector, they should still be able to go and get a job. That would more likely be in social services. Yeah, it is an issue. You get overeducated. I don't like that word overeducated. Nobody's overeducated. The question is, can we find work that's intrinsically worth doing? And I think part of that is changing how we organize our firms. And that's where I like worker co-ops, where collectively the workers can decide, okay, we're going to share the brain work and the grunt work. And I have to tell you, I've worked in construction for 22 years. And the best job I ever had was in that worker co-op, because when I worked for another contractor, I got exploited. I didn't get what I deserved. And when I was the contractor, I worked day and night. This is before computers. I have to do my budgeting and everything and my bookkeeping on graph paper. And, I would work, 8 to 10 hours, and whether it was hot or cold, and then I have to go home and do all that paperwork. Man, so it was exhausting. I made more money, but when I was in the worker co-op, we shared that paperwork and we shared the work on the job sites. And I think that's, a great way to think about how we get everybody their fair share of fun work and their fair share of, work we just got to do.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. And more practical educations in our high schools about money and finance and all that stuff. I was just amazed how we didn't even have that. And I went to Beverly High. I didn't go to I grew up in Beverly Hills, and we didn't even have any of this practical education, which was insane to me.
When you went, did they still have home economics?
No, they got rid of all of that. I was born in
still,
88.
Yeah,
so.
In the 60s, they still had it, but it was being denigrated. And it made people suckers for, bank loans or payday loans. I mean, people really...
Student loans.
Student loans, yeah. I think those kind of courses are really important. And, they've narrowed the curriculum down to teaching for the test and leave out so many important things which you can't even measure by a test, like teamwork, leadership, intellectual self-confidence. You score low on a test and you think you're stupid. And some of the smartest people I know are poor test takers. Yeah, there's a lot to do on education policy as well.
Mr. Hawkins, one of the things that Andrew Yang said when he was running for president, like you, he said that this is the longest job interview he'd ever undertaken. And I'm sure you're still in that stage. But we're wondering, what would you do, or how would you, right now you're in the talking phase and, letting people know who you are, but what do you do to listen to the people in the United States, and how would you make the government more responsive to the people's concerns? Because we have a failure of listening, I think, in our government, and actually being able to make changes, at a rapid enough rate to accommodate the people's needs. So what would you do for that to heal our divide right now?
There are a couple things in there. The divide between the Democrats and Republicans, which they play as a zero-sum game, is the result of having two ideologically opposed parties in a two-party system. You have a multi-party democracy. It doesn't pay to go negative. And you got to build coalitions during the election, because if you got a multi-party system, you probably have ranked choice voting to elect proportionally represented legislatures. And you want the second rankings of your opponent's voters. So you don't go negative on them. You just present your positive program. And then when you're in the legislature, you got to build coalitions, and they shift. Suppose we had the Greens and Libertarians in Congress along with the Democrats and Republicans. Greens and Libertarians would be on the same side on drug policy reform, staying out of stupid foreign wars, cutting corporate welfare, civil liberties. But when it came to economic policies, Greens would be more with the progressive Democrats, and the Libertarians would be more with the Republicans. So depending on the issue, it shifts. So you don't want to burn your bridges by, being so damn nasty to each other. And while they're fighting each other, they're not solving problems. So I think that's what we got to deal with, the divide. We got to have a multi-party democracy, which means ranked choice voting for president, certainly. We can't have the Electoral College keep installing Republicans that lost the popular vote. The whole 21st century, that's what Republicans got installed by losing the popular vote, and the Electoral College put them in. And then in legislators, we got to have multi-member districts with ranked choice voting, so that each party gets representation in proportion to the support they really have. So that deals with the division. As far as listening goes, there are two things I would say about that. I've been preaching to the Greens and the whole left that we got to stop preaching at people and start listening. Every good organizer in a union or in a community organization knows you don't go out and try to get people involved by saying, here's the leaflet, here's the program, join us, with people that, particularly for the Green Party, who the hell are us? Who the hell are you is what people are going to say. And they say that to the peace activists or whoever's coming out to enlist people, particularly in the working class communities, that feel like they're ignored until election comes around, and they get advertised that, and they say, we're not voting. And they don't vote. We had 100 million people not vote in 2016. So I'm saying the Green Party got to learn how to be organized. Go out and listen. Build friendships and relationships. And then you can talk about the politics and build organizations so that, people in these communities, they know who the Green Party is. We've been with the people, we've listened to them, and, helped them. That's one part of it. The other part is our government is very centralized, despite its federal structure. We don't have what we had in the cradle of the American Revolution. That was town meeting. Direct democracy in the towns of New England. And it spread right through New Jersey. Even Charleston, South Carolina had it in that period. And then when these New Englanders settled the Midwest, they started with town meetings. And those were direct democracies. And it still functions in New Hampshire and Vermont. Once a year at least, they meet, they adopt a budget, they elect they call them aldermen, but basically a council, to carry out the policies that are decided at town meeting. And at town meeting, while they usually deal with the budget and you have the usual loudmouths come in, everybody knows everybody, and then they argue like crazy over should the volunteer fire department, should we buy them a new ladder, and exhaust themselves on that, and then the important stuff, kind of flies through, which happens in Congress too. That's just kind of the nature of those things. But the point is, you have an issue you want to bring to your community in New Hampshire, it takes 15 signatures. They call it a warrant article. Get 15 people in town to say, we want to talk about, one thing we did is stopping the Seabrook nuclear power plant back in the 70s. People brought the Vietnam War, put it on the agenda. The nuclear freeze movement in the 80s, the Iraq War in the early 2000s. And while there's not a formal connection to those resolutions to their representatives at the state or federal level, they carry enormous weight. For example, in fighting the Seabrook nuclear power plant in New Hampshire, when we started, we had 7% of the people with us. And we sat in the nuclear construction site, 1,414 of us were arrested. They put us in National Guard armories for 10 days. We're all over the news, all over the country. The anti-nuclear movement exploded out of that. But the people in New Hampshire, they said, okay, you got our attention. But then we went to town meeting and we said, the utility's making you pay for this thing before we even know it works. And this is rock rib Republican New Hampshire back then, reading the Manchester Union Leader. Much more conservative place than it is now. And these conservative people said, you radicals are right. Why the hell are we paying for this in our rates when it isn't even built? Traditionally, you don't pay for a power plant till it's on the grid. And we took that up and down the state, and it passed in hundreds of towns. And then the governor, who had got elected pushing this, it's called construction works in progress, he knew he couldn't pass it. The people didn't want it. That's the kind of structural grassroots democracy I think we need to be thinking about. And that's something we got to do in local governments, rewrite our city charters to empower neighborhood assemblies, rewrite town charters to return to the town meeting idea. And so I think then it's not just, getting the people in power to listen, it's having a structural power where they have to listen because your voice is real clear. And, you know, you can strengthen what the town meeting resolution has a moral suasion, but you can make it what they called in the French Revolution and the Paris Commune, the imperative mandate. So in the sections of France, the neighborhoods, they had assemblies, and then they'd elect people to the city council, and the sectional assemblies would give them imperative mandates. So they would be under instruction of how to conduct business in the council. And that really linked the grassroots power to the representative power. So I think there's a lot we could do, and it's very much in the American revolutionary tradition, and the damn left has forgot about it. And I think that's, you know, one thing I hope to, in this campaign, get people thinking about again.
That was a beautiful answer, sir. Last question,
Yeah,
I'll
that
let
was
you
great.
go. Yeah, it's been an honor to speak with you today. What I want to know is, what is your favorite swear word?
Well, I think the one that pours out is the MF word. You know, when I'm talking about Trump or even Biden these days.
You know what the new MFers are? We're the new moving forwarders. The new move forwarders.
All right, that's a perfect answer to that, sir. I think I personally definitely agree with you on that one, man. So once again, Mr. Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll give the floor to you, whatever, for your closing statement, if you'd like.
Okay, well, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I know the people you talk to in my campaign say my time is so limited, but I'll take time out for you guys. I enjoyed this conversation. I can't even remember if I said that in this discussion because I'm doing this all day, every day. I repeat myself, but you know, I started my campaign on we're trying to provide real solutions to 3 life or death issues, and that was the climate meltdown, and our answer is the full-strength Green New Deal. The inequality crisis, where working class life expectancy is in decline in this country. So that's where the economic Bill of Rights to end poverty and economic despair comes in. And then the new nuclear arms race. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has their doomsday clock the closest it's ever been to midnight. The international campaign for the abolition of nuclear weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize 3 years ago for getting 122 nations to agree to the text of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that was signed 3 weeks ago last week. So there's a nuclear disarmament movement out there in the world, and nobody in this country knows about it. None of the presidential candidates are talking about it. None of the political leadership is talking about it. And the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists is trying to warn us we're in deep trouble. So those are the 3 issues. And now we got the coronavirus pandemic and the uprising against racism, which is an old problem, a life or death issue for people that face violence at the hands of police or the institutional violence of poverty and discrimination. So those are the issues around which we've organized our campaign. There are a lot of issues, but we're saying when you go to the polls, vote for what you want. If you want Medicare for all, the full-strength Green New Deal, and a guaranteed minimum income, vote for what you want. You vote for Biden, who's against those things, you get lost in the sauce. You know, you can be a Yang voter who wants UBI. Biden's not for that. I mean, what we're talking about may be a little bit different than what Yang was talking about, but it's the same principles. And if you want to make your vote count, vote for what you want. Make the politicians come to you. You get lost in the sauce with Biden, they don't know you're a Yang ganger. You're just another Biden voter. So, you know, we'd love to get your votes when it comes November. And, you know, the election is just one step in a long struggle. This is a marathon. So those are my last words for now, and maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, we would
Thank you
absolutely
so
love to
much.
have you on again. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you for coming and talking with us. Does anybody else want to have?
Yeah, that was fun.
Have a great day, Howie.
All right. Take care.
Oh, that was a great conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
That really
And
was.
it's interesting how the actual
Bye.
people are different when they
Ta-da.
get a chance
He
to.
didn't want to end though. He's like, no.
He's like,
Right
what?
now, I got all day.
Yeah, I think sometimes the gatekeepers are a little protective, but that is their job.
That's exactly it. The gatekeepers. It's hard to get past them, man.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. We should probably wrap up this stream here. Should we do our sign-offs?
Well, we did at the beginning.
We
but
did
I
at the
guess-
beginning, yeah.
We did.
Does
All right,
anyone
good.
else have a call to action right now?
All your representatives and get us all cash.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Rate
100%.
things
And
on your
and at
vehicle.
least if that doesn't happen, like these extended the unemployment boost is set to expire this month. And if that happens, yeah. So I don't know, like call about that at least. Either or, I take both. Either the just direct cash to the people, or just an extension of these benefits, because it's gonna hurt everyone when people have less. I mean, it's just, I mean that's just the most common sense of common sense. That's it.
I don't think people know that we have a website now. So I'd like to let people know that we now have a website that came from directly from contributions that were given to us. It's called the YGRTpodcast.com. So without the at the beginning, YGRTpodcast.com. So that way you can find other ways to listen to or attend our podcasts.
And to get on the show.
That's right. We have our contact information. Everything is there, but we are going to be putting more information on it, and we're going to be retooling it. So this is a temporary placeholder for a minute.
And thank you for putting that together, Faye. I remember too
For producing it, Faye.
Thanks to Peyton and John and
Right. And Hannah, do you have any additional call to actions for us today?
No, nothing specific. But if people are interested in doing more work for UBI advocacy, I recommend hooking in with Income Movement. They have a lot of programs happening, so there's things people can do.
All right. Does everyone get a chance? Jeremy, you want to close this out?
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. This has been an excellent episode of the Yang Gang Roundtable Podcast. Yeah, stay tuned. We got some more great interviews coming up this weekend. And we will speak with you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This was our first presidential candidate interview, wasn't it?
Oh, Tim Ryan, but he had dropped out by then. But
Oh, that's right. That's right.